Hello, welcome back. In this video we're going to be making the low poly. So to begin with, we're going to do a bit of scene organisation. So I'm going to make a new collection for the high poly and put all of the geometry we've made so far in there. Next we're going to duplicate all of the geometry, and then we're going to drag that into the scene collection and hide the high poly folder. Next we're going to make a new collection and call that LP for low poly and put the duplicated pieces in there. Okay, for the low poly we're going to do it the quick and easy way, which is turn off all the sub-D modifiers and basically delete all the edge loops. I'm going to do minimal cleaning up of geometry. So here, just deleting all the sub-D modifiers. The text on the front is going to be baked in as a normal map, so I'm just going to delete that altogether. And delete one side of the legs because we don't need both. We can mirror these across afterwards. Okay, with all that done, we're going to select this piece to work on first. Just going to isolate that. And then remove this edge. In fact, we can remove this whole face because you're not going to see it. Remove the edge, the support loops. With the one on the top, I'm just going to use shortest path select and then change that to edge select, border select, sorry, and delete that ring. And then I'm going to delete all the edge support loops on this piece. For the threads we made, the easiest way to do this is probably select the ring of faces around each one and then grow the selection. We can delete all those off completely and then bridge the gaps, and then we'll remove the edge loops afterwards. Yeah, the threads will get baked down on the normal map, so we don't need them physically modelled in here. Just going to fix this part up here. Change this from an n-gon to a quad. Just going to join these verts. Select them and press J. And again on the other side. Apply all the transforms and mirror on the x-axis. Then we're going to select the middle piece, isolate it, and basically do the same thing again. We only need to remove these from one side of the model because we're going to mirror it across afterwards. On these pieces I'm just going to join these verts to make everything quads. I'm not sure if I need these bottom faces yet, so I'm just going to delete those. Then mirror and bisect, and apply the mirror. Can delete the center edges that the mirror created. Where it overhangs, you can see those empty edges, empty faces on the bottom, so I'm going to put those back in. Just a simple case of bridging edge loops. For this bit we just border select, right click and N to add a face, and then fill in all the edge loops. Just joining all the verts together. Doesn't need to all be quads, but it looks nicer when I do a wireframe render later on. And then just mirror that across again. Check there's no extra verts overlapping. Just merge by distance, and then I think that piece is done. Okay, onto the main body of the claymore now. And there's some support loops there we added. It's always a good idea to check when you're removing edge loops that they're not actually connected to any kind of corner, or nothing else has been selected by accident. Sometimes, especially if they're on a diagonal, you'll delete a diagonal edge that connects a corner, and then you'll realise, 10 minutes later that you've deleted a whole section of your model that you didn't mean to. The ones that just run completely around the model are absolutely fine to delete. These inset ones can be deleted. Just going to border select on those. These ones were just for support. These ones are going to be a little bit trickier to fix up. As I was saying, yeah, I've clearly deleted the wrong edge there somewhere, because that whole corner piece has disappeared. So I need to put that back in. Here I'm going to fix these up into corners first of all, just so that the geometry doesn't collapse when I remove things. Don't actually need an edge there, we can just connect it to that corner. I think that might be the way to go. Yeah, just going to align these edges to the bottom so that they meet this corner properly. Again, we don't need a loop that goes all the way around the model for that, we're just going to connect that to the corner. And we can mirror that across to the other side. Check bisect and flip if necessary. Merge by distance just to check we haven't got any overlapping verts. Get rid of the center line. Can merge these corners as well. Don't really need that loop to go all the way around. So if we delete that, that should be fine. Yeah, that's working fine. Do the same with these ones. We can remove those edges on the front. That's it. The one on the back, I think the best thing might be if we do a ring select around the model, and then let me just have a look. We don't want to delete any that are around the depth of the model around this way, because they're all contributing to the curve of the geometry. So we're going to leave all of those ones in. Yeah, but we can, all these ones on the back, we want all of those ones and the ones in between. If we select all of those, then we can press M and then collapse, and that will just make one edge loop going around the middle, with it sort of pinched in the middle where it joins into that box. I think otherwise it's a bit too long of a stretch for the geometry. So one's fine there, and then we're going to mirror that across. Again, delete the middle edge that we created with the mirror modifier. Shade smooth just in case. Okay, that's that part done. These brackets should be fairly easy. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4 loops we need to remove. One on either side of the top and bottom, and one on each side, left and right. Oh, and the 2 for the corner. Those 2. As before, I'm just going to join these verts just to make it all quads. It's not entirely necessary to do this. In fact, it's not necessary at all, but I just prefer to do it. This piece isn't going to be fully optimized. The top part of this bracket that's facing the model could actually be removed altogether. But sometimes it's better to keep your geometry watertight. Other times it doesn't really matter. Just depends what you're using it for. Can just duplicate these faces and snap them up to there. See, it's misaligned for some reason, I'm not sure why. These faces will need to be flipped as well because they're copied from a piece facing the other way. So just Alt and N and then select flip so that they face outwards, and then merge by distance. Yeah, I can see that the top and bottom verts there are all misaligned, so I'm going to line those ones to the bottom and those ones to the top. And the same with these ones. That all looks fine. And just check the face orientation. I've got that in a pie menu, which I've got set to Shift F9, Shift 9, sorry. Okay, onto the legs. Again, I'm going to remove the edge loops that go all the way around the model. Just going to check actually let's not remove that one because that one's needed. So we'll do the edge ones, they're fine to remove. Any that go into a point or a corner, you're better off keeping them. You just have to be careful what parts get deleted when you're removing these. This isn't the 100% most accurate way of doing this because when we beveled it does move the edges slightly. But for this size of this piece of this model, I don't think it's going to matter a great deal. It's not going to be massively noticeable. Just going to merge this. And the same on the other side. Fabulous. I think funky's happened on the back side there. Seems to have an extra ring of faces around part of it. So I'm just going to delete that. No, that's fine. Remove the support loops from this edge. We're going to keep all the ones on the extruded dome. They're all affecting the silhouette of that piece, but all these ones in the middle we can delete and grid fill. Change the span down to 2 and adjust the offset if you want to. Not necessarily, but it's just better to look at, I find, with straight geometry. That loop through there contributes to the cylindrical part of the detail, so I'm going to keep that where it is. And then just mirror that across, and the same for the bracket, just mirror that across and apply the mirror. Just going to check the face count, so 1260 for the low poly and 213,000 for the high poly. We could still make that lower for the low poly, but I think honestly that will do for this. The internal faces on the brackets that hold the legs on, for example, could be removed. There's probably some faces on the bottom of the part on the top that could be removed. But it's not really worth the effort at this stage. So next we're going to add seams so that we can unwrap it. On hard surface models, unwrapping the seams is quite an easy process. This won't take very long. I'm just going to go around like I did with the making the low poly, and just isolate each individual piece and then mark seams where I want them. So all of these rings, because this is basically a cylinder that's bent, it's quite easy. You just add in seams to all of the rings that go around the cylinder. And then you need one loop that goes down the length of all of those cylinders so that it'll unwrap flat. So just select the whole loop around the middle and then deselect the top half before marking. I'm not sure if we're better off with a seam in that middle part or not. Just going to check that now. So yeah, we want to try what this seam looks like if we have one here. So the best way to check is to just bring up a UV editor. We nearly finished unwrapping this piece anyway, so we'd be doing this part next. If we unwrap it without, that's the result we get. So if we add in a seam and unwrap again, yeah, that's a much better result. Okay, yep, so we're going to keep that seam in there. Just move that window over so that we can work in the bigger window. Just mirror it over and apply. Now, if you used these UVs as they were on that piece, those two items that we just mirrored would be sharing the exact same UV space, and any individual details you painted on one side would automatically appear on the other. Sometimes that's useful, often it's not. So at the end we will be joining the whole model together and then unwrapping the whole thing so that everything gets its own space. Stacked UVs also cause all kinds of problems with things like ambient occlusion. As I may have said before, marking the seams for hard surface models is quite easy because it's just all the 90-degree angles. And then for cylinders, you usually need an extra seam just up the length, just so it can unfold flat. Not all of these seams are necessary. I think some of the ones on these corners on the outer side don't necessarily need them because they'll unfold around to the bit that goes into the cylindrical part. But just as a first pass, it's always just easier to just do anything that's a 90-degree angle. You've got to think of it in terms of where do you want individual islands to be made in your UV layout. Just going to delete the half that we haven't unwrapped, that we haven't marked the seams for, and just mirror that over. And hit apply. we'll be hitting unwrap again, like I say, at the end when we've joined everything together anyway. Just going to delete those edges, they were left over, we didn't need those. Might just do those corners. And then the back part we'll just unwrap as one piece. Yeah, don't think we need seams on those corners because again that'll just unwrap around the corner. That's absolutely fine. Just basically just look over the model every now and then just to check that it looks okay, and then unwrap that. Yeah, I think that's actually looking fine. Onto the main piece now. The majority of the front piece, the majority of the whole of this piece, in fact, is rectangles at different extrusions. So there's going to be a lot of loops that just go around the whole model. The only difference being that notch that's cut out there. So for that we'll have to mark all of it. We don't need. I don't think we need those inner corners because it will just unwrap in one little strip. Just use mirror selected, or selection mirror, sorry, and then click extend, and it will select the same edges on the other side, so we can mark both sides. Same here, this edge loop just goes around the whole model. Same here, top, bottom on both sides. We don't need a seam on that piece. On the high poly, I don't know if you remember, we inset those faces so they're already catching the light slightly differently, and that will be reflected on the low poly without a seam necessary there. Similar to with cylinders, we now need to add seams down the length, or the depth in this case, of this model. So anything where we've got a loop, we need to have it joined to so that it unwraps in a strip. Any flat pieces, not necessarily, because they'll just unwrap as a flat rectangle. Like that one there, for example, that will just project flat and there won't be much distortion with it. But at the same time, we don't want massively long strips of vertices in the UV, strips of faces, sorry. So if we add in those corner seams, that'll break it up and give us more texel density in the UV. Just merging over these verts, so we can delete that bottom edge loop there. We don't need that. You can do all this at the same time. If you wanted to, you could do the low polying and the UVing, the seams placement at the same time. But I prefer to work in stages so that I don't get too much extra work to do when I get quite close to the end. I like to know that I've done everything before without having to keep going back and forth. Whereas if I was trying to do two things at once, I would most likely miss a lot of stuff. Whereas here I'm still missing stuff, but I'm missing relatively few things compared to if I was trying to do the low polying and think about seams placement at the same time. And seams placement for hard surface, as I've said before, is very easy to do. Okay, that all looks quite neat. The front is a little stretched, but not too bad. Next, onto the brackets. Again, very easy, just marking the 90-degree angles. I think that we then need, we need one there and one the other end, just so that unwraps into a strip. Actually, no, let's put them in the corners. I'm just thinking because otherwise it will, on the UV map, it will put it on there at a 45-degree angle, which is simple to rotate, but you're better off with everything at 90-degree angles to begin with. It just means there's less to fix up later on. If you put things in your UVs that are at an angle, when it's a straight row of quads, you will get anti-aliasing from the textures that you use visible on the model, and sometimes it can be quite noticeable, especially in the normal map. You'll get a lot of distortion and sort of fuzzy edges on things where you should have nice clean bakes. Onto the leg piece, just adding seams on all the hard edges again. You also kind of want to put seams, if they're not on the 90-degree angles, you kind of want to put them in places that are hidden as much as possible, so that it's not so obvious. It won't matter too much for this model because we're going to be doing procedural texturing in the first pass. So procedural texturing, if you don't know, it's mathematical based. So it's you can change the scale of it and it will just apply it evenly over all the edges and corners, and everything will just look absolutely fine, kind of regardless of where you put your seams. We're doing this more for optimization. You generally want as few UV islands as possible. Just going to break this piece up just so we haven't got really long faces on the UV. If we just do a quick unwrap, we can see what that looks like. Right, so I don't like those being at an angle, so I'm going to add in another seam there. That will cut the round part off from the top, from the leg. Makes that straighter, and I don't like how that angled part on the leg where it splits off. I don't like having that attached, so I'm going to separate that into its own piece as well, and that should straighten everything up. Yep, that looks much better. Okay, mirror that across and apply the mirror. Okay, exit out of isolation mode. And then we're just going to join everything together. Sorry, need the UV editor again, I don't know why I closed that. And then just unwrap the whole thing. And then if we look at that. I've got various add-ons for UVs installed. They're all free ones. They're definitely worth checking out if you've got the time. I actually got them all recommended in Simon Fuchs' Blender drone tutorial that's available on his Gumroad. It's definitely worth getting. It's probably got the best way of setting up your Blender for easy modelling and texturing and UVing of any course out there, while using free add-ons only for the most part. Well, I say for the most part, it is entirely free, the add-ons that he suggests, but he does also recommend one or two paid ones that are optional but not necessary. UV Packer does a great job of packing the UVs, as you might expect from the name, but it also gives you this percentage in the UV sheet of how much of the space has been utilised, and if you keep clicking pack, it will give you different amounts. So you obviously want the higher number as possible. So you get some where it will give you a low result, others where it will give you a high result. You can also change this by changing where your seams and unwraps are, obviously. 83 seems to be about the best we're going to get, so I might leave it at that. Okay, and that's that for that part. Next we will be setting this up for baking, and save the model.